Previously, I made a video where I was breaking down my day one speedrunning strategy for the upcoming early access launch of Dune Awakening, where we had ourselves landing a sand bike within the first 5 minutes of gameplay. However, recently, Funcom developers have come out and stated in a Q&A that they have removed vehicle spawns from early game locations, and I believe even some of the later game locations, mainly because people were using them to skip past a lot of the content. In my strategy, we were basically grabbing the sand bike so we could cross the gap as quickly as possible. However, I've heard of some sweaty guilds out there who have been playtesting Dune Awakening for a while now, who have it routed out all the way to finding their very first ornithopter and getting to the deep desert within the first hour, which is admittedly a bit overpowered. So it does actually make a lot of sense if they come in and remove these vehicle spawns from the game. And that's exactly why today I wanted to break down a reworked and refined speedrunning strategy. And in this one, we are crafting our very own sand bike. And in reality, we're only adding a few extra steps to the speedrun. Big shout out to Psych605, who actually commented on one of my previous videos and gave me this idea to rework the speedrun without the vehicle spawn inside of it. But let's go ahead and jump on into this thing here. Before I start, there is some important information that I want to break down in regards to the requirements for crafting your very first sand bike. For starters, we are going to need a minimum of 8 intel points. It's worth mentioning that inside of my beta playthrough, that the very first time I even opened up the research tab, I already had 4 intel points. So getting that up to 8 should really be no problem at all, especially considering that you get these intel points from several things, including leveling up, which you should be doing a few times throughout this speedrun. So in reality, you should not have to go out of your way at all in order to get the intel points necessary to craft your first sand bike. But you are going to want to start the game out in unlocked mode, so you even have the ability to unlock the sand bike. On top of 8 intel points, you're also going to need 49 copper ingots, which translates over to 196 copper ore, as well as 6 particle capacitors and 13 advanced cervix. So keep all of those requirements in mind as we kind of work through this refined speedrun here. This interactive map that I'm going to be working on here is on the Awakening wiki, which is an excellent source for Dune Awakening information. I'll have a link to the map down in the description so you guys can go through and plan out your own speedrun route, or just look for whatever schematics you guys want to farm out. I'll have a link to the map down in the description. But let's go ahead and get started here with the very first step, which is to complete the tutorial, obviously. Unless, of course, it does allow you to skip this tutorial, though I highly doubt it. After you complete the tutorial, you're going to be spawned at random somewhere in the South Haga Basin, and regardless of where I spawn, we're going to be working our way towards the very first trial. And while we are working our way towards the very first trial, we are going to be picking up every piece of fiber that we can see, as well as every copper node that we find. Like I said, we need 196 copper ore, so this is by far the most important material that I need to be keeping track of. But on top of that, we also are going to need to get our hands on some metal scrap and even some fuel cells. So those are things that we'll be keeping an eye out for on our way to the first trial as well. When it comes to the 196 copper ore, thankfully you get a decent amount of it from each rock, so it should be no problem getting that amount of copper while we are walking in between these first couple of areas. Also, the second that I can unlock the sprint ability for the Bene Gesserit, we're going to be doing so and slotting that in, because that is going to help us traverse the map a whole lot faster. On top of that, though, we also need to be spending 3 research points, 2 of them on the pistol and then 1 of them on the makeshift gear. Obviously crafting those as soon as we have the ability to do so. If I happen to spawn somewhere that makes it to where walking past the area where the sand bike was supposed to spawn isn't too much out of the way, then I'm going to be sure to do that just to see if they happen to, leave one sand bike behind just for me. However, don't count on this. So in reality, first and foremost, we are going to be working our way to that very first trial and then obviously completing it. And then after we complete the trial, we are going to work our way north across the desert to the lab. And this is actually the first part of the speed run that really deviates from the previous plans. And that's because right when we get to the entrance of the lab, we're going to be looking to be placing down a base as close as possible. This is just going to be a very small base because we only need it for a couple of minor things, but we are going to have to spend 1 intel point on the construction kit and then 1 intel point on the ore refinery at this point in time because I want to get that copper down and refining as quickly as possible. Then once we have that copper ore smelting, we are going to dump our inventory into a chest, craft up some bandages, and then head into the lab. We need to fully complete this lab for several reasons. There's a few different quest items that we want to pick up from here, mainly the planetologist quest item, but there's also the items that we need to craft the sand bike, being the particle capacitors and the advanced cervix. You can see in this clip here that this one chest that we opened, we got 5 cervix and 2 particle capacitors. So getting the amount of required materials that you need for the sand bike should be an absolute piece of cake. On top of that, as you can see, if RNG is on your side, you could potentially even pull a used vehicle part out of one of these chests. You can see here in the beta playthrough, I pulled some treads out of this chest. So this potentially could save you some copper ingots. However, in reality, we already have all of the required ingots being smelted at the base. So this isn't necessary at all, but it is worth pointing out that it could happen. We're also looking to grab the Emperor's Wings schematics out of this lab, which are a big part in my whole solo build plan. Check that video out if you haven't already. But then after we complete the lab, we're going to head up to the planetologist and then both start and then complete that quest, unlocking the planetologist class. Then we're going to head back down to our base and use the last 3 intel points required for the sand bike, spending 1 to unlock the fabricator and then spending 2 to unlock the sand bike itself. Finally, we're going to be able to craft everything that we need for our very first sand bike. So inside of the fabricator, we're going to need to craft ourselves the welding tool. On top of that, we're going to need to craft 3 treads, followed by 1 of each of the remaining sand bike parts. And now that we have our sand bike made, the speedrun itself is actually very similar to the previous video that I made. However, there have been a couple of optimizations that have been made that I think are worth pointing out. So I'm just going to quickly run through the rest of the plan here. All right, so after we get our bike right here at the lab, we're going to be working our way over here to the trading post where we're going to be picking up the trooper quest. Then we're going to head along the north side, riding these mountains here, collecting any fiber and granite that we can find. And instead of heading directly to the trooper quest, we're actually going to be making a pit stop right here at the shipwreck. We need the Calif's drinker schematic out of this shipwreck, which is crucial for our after speedrun plans. Check that video out if you haven't already. Once we have Calif's drinker, that's when we're going to go through and hit up all of the caves that we need to in order to complete the trooper quest, which I believe is this cave right here, a cave down here, and then this one right here. However, because all 5 of these caves are in a close vicinity to one another, we're going to still hit up each and every single one of these caves on our way through before we head back over to the outpost in order to unlock the trooper quest and, more importantly, the Shigawire Claw. If at all possible, while we're at the outpost, we're going to also turn in those extra quest items that we retrieved from the lab. However, if we can't turn those in, it really is not that big of a deal because the main thing we needed out of here was the trooper class and the grappling hook. So after we unlock that, we're ready to pack up all of the materials from our base and then head north across the gap. Once you're across the gap, you're obviously going to want to abandon your base. Then what I'm going to do is head up here northeast to this second trial right here to unlock the sand compactor. This thing is massively important when it comes to crafting silicone blocks and is definitely going to be something that you want to get your hands on. And then after we get our hands on that sand compactor, we're finally ready to make our way up to our final and main base location, which I'm hoping we're fast enough to land somewhere right here in this Bear Claw formation of mountains. This actually sets us up with a really nice farm loop riding these mountains down here. And on top of that, up in these locations over here is where you're actually going to get access to carbon, which you need for steel. So I'm really hoping to land a base somewhere in this general region. Not even to mention the fact that you have the PvP ship right here, which might be able to provide you with some entertainment at the very least. Really, after this point is where I change the focus of my grind towards unlocking passive water generation. I break down everything that I have planned for that in this video, but that's everything that's changed when it comes to my day one speedrunning strategy. And we are going to be implementing this strategy right here live on YouTube as well as Twitch. I'll have a link to the Twitch down in the description. So be sure to stop by on day one and check on how our progress is going. If you made it this far into the video, comment "made it" down below so I can give you an extra shout out. Be sure to hit that like button on your way out. It helps tremendously when it comes to pushing these videos into the algorithm. But other than that, I hope you guys all have an amazing day. I'm out.